Hello and welcome back to this video series where we're looking at building an e-commerce platform in 25 days using Next, Netlify, and Stripe. So in the last video, we looked at making a request to an external API to get these Pokemon. And so I'm going to draw out on this sketchpad what we were kind of doing there and how we could improve it. So imagine this teddy bear here is our user. So our user is a lovely teddy bear using our application. This star represents our web app. And so they would make a request to our web app and then they would see the page displayed in their browser. And then this spanner in the works here is the Pokemon API. And so this is where we're actually getting our Pokemon images and names from. Okay, so you can imagine our teddy bears at home making a request to our Next application. So that's then sending back basically what we've been building in React. So it sends back a template for the page, but then in that we've got an Axios request that's going to go off to the Pokemon API, and it's going to get back the first 151 Pokemon. So that's sent back from the Pokemon API. But then we look at index 1 and we say, well, we also want the extra data for Pokemon 1. And it says, cool, here's the extra data. And we say, and we also want the data for Pokemon 2, and Pokemon 3, and Pokemon 4, and Pokemon 5, and Pokemon 5, all the way through to 151. So we make one request to our web app, and then we get back what our page should sort of look like once we have that data. But then we're making all these requests off to the Poke API to be able to get that data. Okay, so we probably want to clean up all these requests that are going off to the Poke API from our client because it's just a silly number of requests, especially since they're happening every single time they press refresh. So let's get rid of those. So we're back at the beginning. Let's imagine a wonderful world where our app ahead of time could go off to the Pokemon API and it could say, give me all 151 Pokemon. And it goes, okay, cool. Here are the 151 Pokemon. And the star says, okay, give me number 1, give me number 2, give me number 3, give me number 4, give me number all the way to 151. And then what if it could sort of bake those values into a web page so that when our client comes and requests our web app, we can just say, oh yeah, you want 151 Pokemon? Well, here's that page that I've already created for you. And then the client doesn't need to do any more work. It's already got this page that has all 151 Pokemon and their images baked into it. Okay, so let's have a look at what that might look like in code. So just so we can see the difference side by side, I'm just going to create a new component. So I'm just going to clone this client-side component, and I'm going to call this one just SSG, which is short for static site generation. And then rather than client side, I'm going to call this component static side. And then that's what we're going to export out at the bottom. So static side. And then that should be a completely, well, exactly the same component, but at a different route. If I start my server again, at client side, we should see our Pokemon eventually. Yeah, cool. And at SSG, we should see the same thing. Okay, great. So in this ssg.js file, this is where we're going to build up our fancy static generation version of this page. So Next.js gives us a really convenient way to tell it what data we want to be static. So what we want it to go and fetch at build time and then turn into static pages. So the way we do that is we export a function from our page level component called getStaticProps. And this is an async function. And then from this function, we return an object with the key props. And then that's another object where whatever we return from here, so if I say John is set to the string rules, anything that we return from this props object is going to get passed into our component that's in this same file as props. So if I console log out what props is set to and head back to our app, you'll see that it's printing out that object John rules, which, I mean, obviously we all know that. But the cool thing about this is this function is only actually running once when we rebuild our application. So Next is looking for this getStaticProps function, and then it's going to run it as part of the build process and create our static pages. So this is where we can fetch our Pokemon from. So if we scroll back up here, we have our fetch Pokemon function, which is an async function. We can basically just take everything that's inside this all the way down to here. We don't actually need the set Pokemon part, but we can take everything else and move it into this function. So then we're making a request for our Pokemon, we're iterating over them, we're getting all of our Poke data, and so this is what we want to pass into our component as props. So we can pass in a Pokemon prop, which is set to Poke data. So now inside our component, we should be able to access this Poke data simply by going props.pokemon. So if we head back up here, we don't actually need our use effect anymore because Pokemon are just being passed in as props. We also don't need this use state because, again, we can access our Pokemon with just props.pokemon. So this here, rather than being Pokemon.map, probably needs to be props.pokemon.map. But now everything else should be the same. If we head back over to our app and refresh, so we have our Pokemon printed out to the console there, but it took a significant amount of time to load our page. And if we refresh, it takes just as long. So we're not actually getting any performance wins here, or it doesn't feel like it. So what's happening here is that when we're running over localhost, so when we're running in our dev environment, this is going to rebuild our application every time we refresh the page. So that's why it's taking a really, really long time to see these Pokemon and see the new page. But if we were to deploy a new version of this application to Netlify, we would see what this would look like in production. And so from the previous video, we know that deploying a new version of our application is as simple as adding our files, committing them, add static stuff, and then pushing them up to GitHub. So now I'm going to head over to my site on Netlify. So mine was called Superstore. And then we're just going to see if we're currently deploying. So you'll see here, this is currently building a new version of our application. So once this is published, we can go back up and click on our URL and go to /client side, just so we can see what that looks like in production when we're loading those Pokemon. So you see it's taking a long time. We don't have any feedback telling the user that we're even loading anything, which isn't great. But then these Pokemon pop in. However, if we go to our SSG, it's there straight away. And if we refresh, it's there straight away again. And we refresh, it's there straight away. And that's because all of this data has already been pre-fetched at build time. So when we pushed up a new version of our application to Netlify, it runs through the build step for Next.js. That's going to go off and make all of the requests that it needs, and then it's going to build up this static version of this page that already has all of our Pokemon with their image and their name baked into the actual HTML page. So then our users don't need to make all those requests to the Poke API because all the data's already there. Awesome. So in the next video, we're going to start looking at actually building up our first e-commerce page. I know there's been a lot of theory and a lot of kind of concepts that we've covered so far, but I think it's important to start on a really strong foundation because the rest of the course, we're going to be using everything that we've learned and building our e-commerce platform. I'll see you there.